Hey there, welcome to Unit 3, Lesson 6. Now, when we left off last week, we were talking about George Washington leaving, the advice that he was giving, and him stepping away as a new president would come into place. This next president is going to be John Adams. You can see I can't seem to stay away from the Hamilton stuff as much as I try. It's just too funny. At least I think so anyway. So let's talk a little bit about the Adams administration and see what exactly it is you might be thinking about John Adams by the time we get to the end of this. So what we're going to do today is do your notes on the Adams administration. And then whenever we are doing that in the middle of the notes, we're going to do a little Jamboard. But if you're watching this video, it means that you weren't actually involved in the class most likely. So you'll be missing out on the Jamboard information. But then once we're done with the notes, the rest of the class period is for you to work on test corrections, extra credits, missing work, anything you can to keep bringing your grade up, because the end of the 9 weeks is next week. So we got to make sure we're doing everything we can to get those things turned in, because time is starting to run short. So your interactive notebook page that you're going to be filling in today is this one right here on the Adams presidency. So today we're going to talk about the election of 1796, an event known as the XYZ affair, the Alien and Sedition Acts, and the election of 1800. So basically bringing an end to the Adams administration. So let's talk about this. We're going to start off by talking about the election of 1796. And this is when George Washington steps away from being president, and we've got somebody, we don't know who yet, but somebody is going to become the next president of the United States. So your people that are running include John Adams, who is a Federalist. So even though George Washington has said, hey, don't create political parties, guess what? As soon as he was out, political parties were essentially created. So John Adams is a Federalist. He was also had experience at being the vice president under George Washington. And then Thomas Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. This is going to be more power going into the hands of the federal government. This is going to support more power in the hands of the state governments. So when it comes down to it, John Adams is going to win the presidency by a total of 3 electoral votes. Because he is the winner, he becomes president. And because Jefferson comes in second place, he becomes the vice president. That's just how it worked at this time. Obviously, it's not going to continue, because what if Adams died? Then suddenly somebody with a completely different set of views is going to be the one to be president. So second place is not going to be somebody that becomes vice president anymore. What's really, really important about all this, though, is that we have this peaceful transfer of power. We show that we can leave Washington behind and transfer power away from one person and into the hands of another person, and the country can still continue on. That is a huge, huge deal. All right, so one of the very first events that actually takes place in maybe not very first, but one of the biggest events that takes place in Adams' presidency is known as the XYZ affair. The reason that this affair takes place, and it's not like an affair like a relationship kind of affair. It's just an event that takes place. So the reason that this happens, though, is because there ends up being kind of this undeclared naval war that kind of sparks out of the United States and France, because we had promised France before that if they ever went to revolution, we would go and help them, because remember, they came and helped us. And we still owed them some money. And so it causes these tensions to rise. So here's what happens. Adams sends a delegation, so a group of men, over to France to negotiate a settlement with them and come to terms and resolve this issue. And some French guys, who are then referred to as X, Y, and Z, which is why this is known as the XYZ affair, demand that before any meeting of negotiation can actually happen, that they got to pay up some money. So basically they're bribing the Americans and being like, oh, you want to talk to us? You want to work with us? Well, you're going to need to pay us some money first. And so that rubs people the wrong way, and continues to cause more tensions to rise. So when the United States refuses to pay that bribe, it leads to what we call the quasi-war. Quasi meaning like kind of war. There's no official declaration of war that happens, but there's just this buildup of tension and fighting that does take place. This gives the Federalists the excuse to build up the military, thus making a stronger federal government, which is what Federalists are going to want to do, and call out a lot of the Democratic Republicans for supporting the French. The Democratic Republicans had been really supportive of the idea that we should have gone and helped out in the French Revolution. But they're like, listen, look at what the French are doing to us now. You wanted to back these guys up? So it kind of helped them out a bit. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is in class, we would have stopped right here and then we would have done the Jamboard. But I want to talk to you about a series of laws that were actually passed and created while Adams was president that he was supporting, known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. They get a lot of criticism. So these 4 acts right here, the first one, the Naturalization Act, increased the time it took to become a citizen of the United States from 5 years to 14 years before you could be considered a US citizen. That is a very, very long amount of time. And the whole idea here is to make sure that people are going to be like wholly American before we give them the American citizenship. The second one is the Alien Enemies Act. We start to get really, really worried about immigrants, and that's who we're talking about when we say aliens here. We're not talking about aliens coming down from UFOs in outer space. We're talking about immigrants. So this allows the president during wartime to arrest or imprison or deport any immigrants from an enemy nation. So if France, for example, is the enemy nation at the time, and the president doesn't want this Frenchman living in the United States, he can kick him out and send him on his way, just because he'll have the power to do that. The next one is the Alien Act, which authorizes the president to deport immigrants that are considered to be dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. And then the Sedition Acts, which is when a person could be fined or even put in jail if they are found guilty of speaking against the government, against its laws, or against its officials. So if you wanted to complain about these acts that were being passed and complain about John Adams being the president and taking this power, you could actually be put in jail or be fined for doing that. This obviously sends people into an uproar. A lot of people are like, this is too much power of the national government. This is exactly what we are afraid of. We don't want to see things like this happening. And so as a result of this, we see the passing of what are known as the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, and that they're introduced. And these were written by both Madison and Jefferson, even though they kind of secretly wrote them at the time, because remember, Jefferson is the vice president. So they declared that the states, when we created the Constitution, had entered into a compact, an agreement with the national government, and said, listen, just because we enter into this agreement doesn't mean that we necessarily have to follow it. If we feel like as a state you broke that contract and you broke the agreement, then we have the right to nullify the law. And to nullify something, let me move myself out of the way here, means to make it void or to make it invalid so that you wouldn't have to follow it. So the idea here is that they're saying, listen, we don't like the law you passed. We think it's overstepping the power of the government. We're not going to follow it, and you can't make us. Like, that's their argument that they're going to be making. So within these 4 years, a lot of things happens with the Adams administration. And eventually we're going to get to another election, which is the election of 1800. Now let's talk about who's running. John Adams is going to run again because he had already been president once. He's going to try and run for another term. He has basically no hope of winning, though, and everybody knows it. Like, nobody is on John Adams' side at this point. Thomas Jefferson wants to run. He's a Democratic Republican. And Aaron Burr wants to run. He is also a Democratic Republican. There's a couple other Federalists that are in there, but again, the Federalist Party had been so damaged at this time that really those Federalists don't have the chance of winning. So really this becomes an election between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. So the election happens, people go and vote, and then the Electoral College has to put forth their votes to decide who's going to be president. But here's the thing, Jefferson and Aaron Burr come up at an even tie with each other. So what this means is that if there's a tie in the Electoral College, the Constitution says that it goes to the House of Representatives to break that tie. The House of Representatives votes, and it's a tie. And then they vote again, and it's a tie. And again, and it's a tie. 35 different votes take place, and nobody will budge. Nobody. And so eventually, though, Jefferson is able to win the presidency, and he can thank Alexander Hamilton for that, because even though Hamilton and Jefferson hated each other, Hamilton and Burr hated each other more. Burr basically was a guy who always waffled on ideas and would be like, I'll support this when it's good for me, and I'll support that when it's good for me, and would flip flop on issues a whole lot. So Alexander Hamilton always said like he didn't really have a spine. He didn't have any beliefs that he stood by. And even though he didn't support Jefferson's beliefs, at least he knew what Jefferson's beliefs were. So Hamilton is like, listen, y'all need to go for Jefferson here. He's the better of the two evils in his mind between him and Burr. And as a result, some people flip their votes and Jefferson becomes president of the United States. So I'm going to back out of this now. I'm sorry if you can hear any like background music. The football team is out and doing some practicing, and there's some loud music, and my windows are open. But so sorry if you can hear that, but I'm sure you're okay. So let me talk to you about what you're going to do for the rest of the period. There is no assignment that goes along with today. I need you to catch up on your missing work. I need you to do test corrections. I need you to work on your interactive notebook. Whatever it is that you need to do, that's what you need to be doing, because again, we are reaching the end of the quarter. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. If you are watching this video because you were absent, make sure you fill in that lesson demonstrated form so that you can get your absence turned into a present. And other than that, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, y'all.